Welcome back to the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. Today, we are diving into the fascinating world and sometimes complex of self development. Companies invest a ton of money on that. I think that it is forecasted like more than $80 billion are going to be spent by 2032. And it's clear for us, for many of us that are seeking to ways to grow, evolve, and live our best lives. There is so much information, many voices out there, but how do we really know what are the potential pitfalls of guru culture and misleading advice? To help us explore these crucial questions, we have a truly remarkable guest today, Lincoln Stoller. So he has been doing many things, but I want to highlight a couple of things. He has a published voice. He's a published voice in astronomy, physics, neurology, anthropology, and psychotherapy. He holds a doctorate in quantum mechanics and certifications in hypnotherapy, counseling, and many other things. He has an adventurous spirit that has led him through near-death experiences, and he's a cultural ambassador across the globe. As a former CEO Lincoln brings a unique multifaceted perspective to understanding human potential and the pursuit of growth. Now, what I want to know is a little bit more about the realities of self-development, and that's why he is my guest today. Lincoln, it is really nice to have you here with me today. While it is almost the evening here in Switzerland, it is early morning back in your country, right, Lincoln?
Yeah, I sleep not enough and I go to sleep very late. So it's morning for me.
For me, with the age, what happens is that I go to bed very early and I wake
Oh,
up very early, like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, but I go to bed also 9:30 in the evening. Um, Listen, Lincoln, I, I was personally interested about the topic. And there is many self-development teachings that touch upon concepts like quantum physics and the law of attraction. What are your thoughts on these connections? How can people understand if there is really a connection or if it is just purely bullshit?
oh, there's something in between. Metaphor. Metaphor is great. Metaphor is wonderful. I'm a total believer in imagination. And I do believe you have to imagine something before you can make it real because otherwise you don't know what you're talking about. Doesn't have to be true. But there are a lot of scientists that object to this bastardization of science in the name of spirituality. And I just don't think they understand the use of metaphor because science is full of new ideas. At least I like the new ideas. And people don't have a lot of access to new ideas. So if you want to get somebody to think something new, you have to give them some picture, even if, well, it doesn't need to be true, of course, and they don't need to understand it. But, for example, quantum mechanics, nobody understands that for, I guess you'd say, good reason, because it seems to contradict reality and even itself sometimes. But if you want to get people to understand something new, you have to A, give them some new idea, and B, you have to get them out of their old ideas. This is one of the basic methods of hypnosis is that you confuse people. That's how you get them into a trance because they lose bearing. And so it can be useful. Doesn't need to be true, and who cares?
Uh, but is there like some type of ethics that there should be with people? Um, I'm thinking about some gurus like Indian origin people who are doctors, and they also explain quantum mechanics to, in order to explain certain decisions that we can have. So it's not anymore a metaphor. It's not anymore for us to understand. I think they're using it just to
No.
justify the lack of
Yes.
understanding of what they want to explain. But there should be a red line where people shouldn't be crossing.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a nice idea that there should be a red line, but most people don't cross it. You can, I understand. You do get some people who justify rather than just explore ideas in
Hmm.
ways that don't stand up to scrutiny. Um, but, aren't most arguments kind of frivolous and shallow? How many people actually deeply understand any argument? Well, I'm not trying to avoid your point, but I'm saying if you get, I remember, so Krishnamurti and David Bohm were a famous pair, and who there were some others like Wolfgang Pauli and Carl Jung. And who knows what they talked about seriously, because they didn't really understand each other because they didn't speak the same language, they didn't have the same background, but they liked sort of the mix of ideas. And it's interesting because I used to go to a Krishnamurti center here, and I knew both of these people's works, Bohm and Krishnamurti, and I was aware that no one in the center understood their works, and they didn't care. These were just kind of celebrities to them, and they justified themselves not because these celebrities had good arguments, but just because they existed. They just rode on their coattails, as it were. Like, oh, this famous man was here, therefore we're right. They didn't even bother with the justifications. So I think a lot of cases, this is why people ask celebrities for their opinion on politics, as if a movie star would have any valid opinion on politics. And people don't care. They ask sports athletes for their opinion on politics and so forth. So people do this, and you object to the polluting of knowledge in the purpose of some alternative theory. And I would say, people just do that. They just do it all the time. So the law of attraction is a nice one because it's, complete bullshit. But it is true. There's some elements that are true. You do see more of the things that you focus on. You don't make them happen. It's not paranormal. It's not supernatural. It's kind of very obvious. If you work at something, you learn more about it. And you get more opportunities, and maybe you learn to avoid certain things, and it becomes a more real concept in your life. And one of my examples is religion. If you're a if you're a discerning person, you can get involved with religion, but you end up finding all of its flaws because religion is full of flaws. And my attitude toward religion is it's a great way for people to agree on something, but it's not very good to give them real answers to anything. And it can be a complete, as we know, way to avoid responsibility for many things, like being a good parent, uh, or any other things you don't really know about. I mean, it's false knowledge, but false knowledge can be fine if it gets everyone to be peaceful and cooperate. I mean, I guess it could be fine. Um, what's the alternative? Is everyone going to study everything and become experts? No, people don't care. So, you don't really have a choice. Either you accept false knowledge for what it's good for, or you criticize everybody for what they don't know and their stupid behavior, which doesn't make you friends and doesn't really change much. So it also like, if I'm writing a book, I write a lot. I write blogs, I talk to people. I always try to remind myself that if I'm not saying something useful to the person I'm talking to, then it's not useful, period, at this time. So I think, oh, maybe in the future my writings will be famous, but that's like a pipe dream. So, you know, you have to talk in ways that people are interested and using topics that they know something about or think they do, and you have to use metaphors and analogies that make sense to people. So if the law of attraction appeals to some people, or another example is the flat earth theory, that appeals to some people. And I was very interested to look at it. Like, I couldn't understand, how could this appeal to you? But it has some rationale. The rationale is I'm paranoid and I don't trust anyone. So that's what it means. It's a mistake to think the earth is flat. You should actually recognize that you're paranoid and you don't know anything. But
Mm.
but okay, so you're trying to build a community. So you find other people who believe your crazy ideas, and then you feel, you know, comfortable. So I would say that the scientists and physicists and academics who object to the way their knowledge is being misused don't understand that people are just building a different language using their words and concepts. And yeah, it's a complete desecration of what they said.
Mm.
Physics is a good example because even the physicists don't understand it entirely. And they also don't understand the whole purpose of it, which is practical rather than, inspirational.
Mm.
But that's an interesting question because you can be inspired by many things. So I don't object to it. I don't object to misusing knowledge if you, I mean, it's like paint. Is paint supposed to be used for, romantic, careful, detailed painting? Or can you smush it all around and make abstract colors? I mean, this is what people thought about abstract painters. They thought they were ruining the whole discipline,
Mm.
some of them. And yeah, some of them were, some of them made garbage, but not always. And so I would use that analogy. When you're misusing knowledge, you're kind of abstract painting with it. And the better judgment criteria is what you accomplish or what you're trying to accomplish and not what you're ruining or misusing. So that's my
I
idea.
tend to agree with your point of view on our duty to accept others as on their beliefs, either with faith, with self-development. Uh, but my guess is that we should, there is a level of responsibility. Like, for instance, if I observe somebody doing stuff that is harmful for them because of their beliefs, that's the line where I will try
Yes.
to jump in and try to provide my insights. Oh, so, but is that correct? Everybody should have this responsibility to go and say, no, you are doing wrong because of these beliefs, either through faith or through beliefs like law of attraction, of quantum physics, and some other crazy stuff about healing your body.
Yeah, I agree. But it also depends on what are you being, what are you given permission to say? So a lot of people exceed their permission.
Mm.
Well, they may not think so, but the listener may think so.
Yes.
So, you know, do you have a right, to interfere with another person's belief? And are you going to be listened to? And if it's a clear line, which is most clear when something's being harmed, then you don't worry about it. You just take action and try to make a situation better because you feel obliged. But most of the problem comes in the gray area where it's opinion. I think you're not being positive. I think you're being destructive. Uh, so I think Donald Trump in the American politics is a great example of someone who claims to be positive and other people claim to be being negative, and it's all chaos and confusion, and the markets are going crazy and the people are shouting at each other. It's not that different from any other situation. It's just such a egregious violation of so many levels and rules and expectations. I, I'm a thoughtful and uh, deep person, or at least I like to study things. So it's nice for me to be a therapist because I get to inquire about things deeply and have a certain amount of respect. It's kind of it's kind of whorish, you know. It's like people pay me for my opinions. So I have to be careful not to think too much about them. What I'm worth is what I'm worth to somebody, not because my opinions are necessarily, valuable. Um, so it puts me in a position where I can apply your rule. If people are being destructive or injurious, my two questions are they injurious to me? Are they injurious to people around them? Are they injurious to themselves? And there's different answers in each case. So I'm paid to endure injury to myself. So people can contradict me and people can accuse me. But I like the fact that I do most of my work remotely because they can't accuse me of touching them. That's nice. It gives me, because people can, you have to understand that as a therapist, anyone can accuse you of anything. And no matter what they accuse you of, you can't defend yourself in
Mm.
public. So that's unfair. So I'd rather just be on your computer screen if that's the rule, you know. So that's nice. But it also gives me the freedom to be wrong, to overextend my boundary because the boundary is unclear. Your growth is the boundary, not social protocol. So I'll say you're full of shit, or I don't agree with you, or that's dangerous, or you're harming someone. And if you don't like hearing that as a client, well, if you were a strong client, you would defend yourself. But most clients will, especially the kind who hurt people, will flee. They will avoid criticism, probably because they get it from other people too. And they don't want to change. Change is sort of at the heart of this whole conversation. How do you get people to change? Usually you make it attractive, or you make it nice, or you make yourself friendly. You entice them into change. But I don't really think that's all that effective because once they encounter the obstacles to change, you're usually not there with them. They're facing their own trauma or whatever. So I want people to be strong and honest and committed. And most people aren't that strong, honest, or committed when it comes to their own weaknesses. But anyway, I'm getting away from the point. Yes, there is a line, and depending on how you're communicating, you have more or less freedom to assert the line. And our conversation right now has a very vague line. Nobody's really insisting that I'm right politically or scientifically. And as I said, I guess before we started recording, everything's bullshit. Uh, and a good scientist will admit that. But that's not the point. In fact, you want to reach the bullshit. That's where it's interesting. And you want to dispute the disagreements rather than assert one point of view or another.
Lincoln, when I read your bio, I noticed that there is some patterns of exploration, curiosity that probably has driven to you to jump from hardcore physics to getting to know the insides of the brains of human beings. Um, and my question to you, so everybody, is it the duty of human beings to have this openness to go and try things? And if this is the way, how can we discern the uh, the the approaches, the things that are genuine, helpful, and true. When we are talking about self development, I don't want to talk in science and politics. No, no, just about self development. Is so if we need to be open to exploration, where how can we validate certain assumptions? Is it something for me that is going to help me, or it's going to potentially harm me? And I don't have all the knowledge of the world to assess it, but there should be some shortcuts.
I think that's a difficult question, and it's an important one. And I think it has a couple of answers that are different. The first important answer, which is the hardest to describe, is that you have to know what feels right for yourself. You have to have some commitment to some values. It has to be something you believe in strongly and has meaning for you. So that's very vague, but obviously the root of your strength and commitment.
Hmm.
So the more you have that, sort of, to use an analogy, like a lever, the more of a pivot it becomes. The more, this is my, so there's not a red line, there's a pink line, and then there's a magenta line, and then there are all these different lines as you go down to things that are closer to your heart. And so there has to be, it's not entirely a duality. It's like, if I agree with you, then we have nothing to talk about. If we disagree, then we fight. It can't be like that. It has to be a combination that we share something, which means you have something to share that you believe in, and you're willing to both engage in other concepts and try to engage other people in other concepts. So back to hypnosis. It's useful to confuse people if you want to get them out of their mindset. So you can use any concepts that are confusing for that. But also to go a little deeper below the level of conscious dialogue, there is a world where things don't make sense. People don't like to live in that world. But it's important to be in that world because most of the world doesn't make much sense. We have to make sense of it. Just like you walk through your kitchen, if you close your eyes, you'll bump into things. And you need to know where things are, even the things you don't want to run into. You need to know where they are in order to avoid them. And the same goes for concepts. I'm not going to talk about having sex with my mother or killing my father. Okay? But you have to know what that means in order to avoid it. So if you're talking to other people, you have to be aware of their boundaries and you have to invite them to be enlarged, their concepts, being aware that the more important the concepts are, the more defensive they might be. But they're also going to be the most important concepts to enlarge. So it's that duality, and it's true in counseling too. The most important ideas are usually the most well defended, or the most traumatic, or otherwise, have some rooting or anger that may make it difficult to change. So, what was your question? I forgot.
So, what are the tricks that we can use in order to spot something that is genuine, that
Oh,
hits
right.
us right, and that is not going to harm us? In all these areas of self-development, there are certain things that might be good, certain things that might be bullshit.
Okay, another idea that I think is generally true is that you have to be ready to fail on any new idea. Because if it's a new idea, how do you know exactly what to do with it? And if you know exactly what to do with it, it can't really be a new idea. So if you want to enlarge, grow, or change, you have to be willing to engage things that either you don't know or to put together concepts that either didn't fit or they're unfamiliar. One of the greatest things that people can do is travel, to go to other places and meet other cultures and do other things. Some people like to read books, other people like to socialize. And both of those things can be enlarging, but they can also be stultifying if you just read the same books over and over again and meet the same people over and over again. So, how do you know? Well, the irony is that you know when you don't know. You know you're in a fertile area when you don't understand. And the question is, how do you know when you don't understand whether you're going in the right direction or not?
Hmm.
And then I think, we just have to learn from molds and other basic life forms. You just reach out, and if it hurts you, you retract. And you keep reaching out to try to experiment in areas where you have this red line of what hurts and what really feels bad based on your deep moral convictions. And you try to explore that boundary, because the more you can find novelty in that important area, you're looking for, in a sense, chaos, new ideas that don't fit, that are not injurious. And that's all I'd say. My background in mountain climbing kind of taught me, the most important lesson it taught me was that there's kind of stuff you shouldn't do, which was mostly of what I was doing. And you should stop doing that if you value your life. And, I say that to people who do extreme sports, and they don't like to hear it because they're trying to achieve the greatest level of competence. And I say, oh, that's really bullshit, because you'll never, you're always going to be, somebody's always going to do something harder. And you know what? In 10 years, you're not going to be able to do it anyway, because you're going to be too old. So what are you doing this for? And are you really learning? For example, on a few occasions, I would climb big, steep, dangerous cliffs without any rope at all. And it's a very interesting mindset you have to be in to do that. You can't be afraid. You can't be concerned. You can have no doubt. You have to use every bit of focus on what's in front of you with total attention to safe progress, not doubt or fear or anything that might distract you. And that's an interesting space to be in, but it's also very dangerous. So I wasn't traumatized at the time, because that's the rule. No trauma, no anger, no fear, nothing. But I'm traumatized now, 50 years later. I think about that stuff and I have nightmares about it. So, uh, and I didn't die, but, it was on the hair's edge of,
Hmm.
I mean, you didn't know it at the time, but anyway. So, how do you know what to do in the moment? Well, it's kind of like that in a kind of a social situation. You're you should be willing to take as much risk as you think is safe, and always try to take more. And it's hard, like in physics, you should always try to be, or any technical field that you're trying to understand, you should always be biting off more than you can chew, but not so much that you choke. So you have to make that decision at every moment. And then you can almost be certain that although you won't choke, hopefully, you will have a hard time swallowing. It will
Hmm.
always be difficult. So there is good difficulty and bad difficulty, and determining it is hard. And if it's not hard, it's not difficult enough. So then you get into the realm of, are you an overachiever or are you a high achiever? And in business, or whatever you want to call that, social accomplishment, financial gain, how much can you risk and why?
Hmm.
It's not always true that the more you risk, the more you gain. Often, the more you risk, you're dead. So, financially or physically or romantically. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't. I don't know, I should take my own advice because right now all I do is stay at home and deal with my clients because they are the most authentic people I know. And I refuse to go out and socialize. I couldn't stand trivial interactions with people. The result is that I don't meet people except as clients. And I'm not a social friend to my clients. I have a higher obligation than being nice
Hmm.
and friendly. So they tend not to. Once they stop paying me, I don't hear from them again.
Hmm.
But I do feel value even in those people who dislike what they've experienced with me because I like to, you know, work with value, not approval.
Hmm. Lincoln, you mentioned in the during this discussion one thing that I find the hardest part of human introspection is to identify values that really belong to me, that haven't been formed by context or formatted by society, especially now that we are influenced by social media and it's kind of formatting us. And so values are the core in order to identify what matches us with our self-development. But for many of us, including me, it has been bloody hard to identify what is really my values. I'm changing. It's not because I'm satisfied that I identified three that I really believe that these are my values. Maybe it's not really my values. When I put family, oh, I'm so proud. It looks so beautiful for others when I share that one of my values is family. But am I sure that I'm not doing it because I don't know, I didn't have family back then in my younger years, or because everybody is going to approve it? So it's very hard for to do that, and it's part of the journey to identify what matches us in terms of self development. How do we crack that shit? I mean, everybody has that problem. I'm not the only one, Lincoln.
You're the only one, Ivan. No one else has that problem.
Good, thank you, Lincoln.
Yeah, right. Well, there are different levels to who we are. And you ask the question intellectually, or at least I heard it that way. And some questions can't be answered on the level at which they're asked. So, yeah, of course, it's like, does God exist? Or, do I really love people? Or do they really love me? And you could say, well, prove it. And that's not going to get very far in most of these questions. So I think you have to recognize there are other levels you could ask. So, like the God question, people answer that with faith or something. Um, and again, it's like, where's the line? Is it safe? Is it helpful? Uh, I live in a Christian society here in Canada. You know, Christianity is, I would say, Abrahamic. There's really no Jews around here, but there are lots of Islamics, but Muslims, but they don't mingle. Canada is a very segregated society. Everybody's happy and separate. So in the Christian world that is immediately outside my environment, that's not. I should say I'm part of it because the mother of my child, now ex-wife, is very evangelical. So my son brings it in, and I try not to be too critical because it's his mother's thing, and
Mm.
it's I just make my point known. But how do you know? So I think they're different levels. So there's the intellectual level, which we recognize as hopeless to answer some of these questions. Then there's the social level. So that's my answer to my son's Christianity. It's like, okay, that's what your friends believe, or you have friends that believe that, and and it forms a basis, but he's only 14. So, what kind of basis does it form? Not much. Most of his basis is formed by video games online, yelling and screaming. That's really his religion.
I know that.
Yeah. But then there's a level deeper, or several levels deeper. One deeper level is what you feel in your heart. Do you really love people? Do you really concerned? Are you really angry? Do you hate certain aspects of society? And that's going to be a touchstone for certain decisions. And then the most interesting decision, or most decision level for me, is what I call your subconscious. And so that's the area of your dreams and your um, reactions, unintentional reactions, um, rooted in memory and trauma and a sense of value. And those are areas I think are very important for me as a counselor.
Mm.
So I talk about dreams and I work with dreams and I have my own perception of what dreams are there for and how to use them. But to put it simply, they're a resource of ambiguity, conflict, chaos, deep feelings, emotional feelings. And you can't be too reductive or analytical because they don't really fit together and you don't really know what to make of it all. So being too rational about it isn't going to help because it's not a terrain of reason. So in that area, really, I think that's the foundation, sort of like a garden. Underneath the soil is where the nutrients and the firmament and the stability and foundation of things exist. Everything that we talk about and think and reason grows on top of that. But if your foundation is bad and you're conflicted and you're depressed, then none of the stuff you grow on top of that is as strong as it can be, and it will have vulnerability and it will lack commitment and lack honesty too. So to work below, I think, is the most interesting and important area. And it's, of course, hard to go to. It's like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. You kind of need someone to talk to who will get outside the realm of friendliness and pleasantry and socially appropriate discussion or current political dialogue to appreciate your own personal confusion. And I value the role of a counselor in this regard. It gives you, it's like talking to a voice in your head.
Mm.
Well, hopefully it's better than that because voices in your head are biased. So hopefully it's less biased. Um,
Sometimes weird.
yeah, good. And yeah, unfortunately, you're going to have to pay for it because it does take a lot of time and it takes quite a bit more energy than you would expect from the other person. Every time. I mean, a good therapist probably thinks 5 times for each word they speak. And it's hard to keep everybody's complicated life in order because their lives are not in order at the deeper level. So it's a job. And the people who need it most often don't have the finances to afford it because they're the most dysregulated and conflicted people. So I'm kind of interested in working with people who can afford it. I mean, definitely, you can work with them longer.
Mm.
Um, their problems are more subtle, not so obvious. They may be more open to new thoughts. On the other hand, the people who really need help, we could call them mentally ill if you want, or emotionally unstable, are also very interesting because of the crazy colors they put together and the strange reasons they have for things. And I guess it's called mental illness when nobody can make sense of it at all. And it's only called emotional difficulties when it has some understandable path toward resolution. Because there's always this question of, can talking help? And the answer is, it can do a lot more if you're skillful at it. Because, like I'm saying, if you go to the subconscious level where you're talking about dreams and hypnosis and trauma, talking can be much more effective than just grammar and reason.
Mm.
And you can get onto you can place yourself in the window of reality, of a deeper reality, if you're skilled at it. Again, I've forgotten what your question was.
It doesn't matter, but it went into a good direction because I find it quite interesting that you have pointed out dreams as an additional source of information, despite the fact that I certainly wouldn't be able to understand my dreams. And even if I read a book about dreams, I wouldn't trust myself that that book will tell me exactly about my dream. But as you mentioned, having a discussion with a therapist is a way to open up uh, the the map of how we could potentially read it, because you have somebody else pointing out different alternative interpretations of the same thing. When we are judging ourselves or our dreams, we tend to find, oh, this dream means exactly that. What the hell? And very often we will be wrong. So I think the option of the therapy is of discussion with the therapist is quite important. We were discussing about values, but
Yeah.
let me move on to something more important, because what I want to gather from you, so in the context of self-development, and especially of the fact that corporations invest quite a lot on self-development, sometimes, well, 20 years ago, it was more about improving technical skills for people. Then they understood that they needed to invest more in leadership, but in fact, leadership was more about managing stuff or resources, including humans inside of the resources, which wasn't very appropriate. During the COVID times, they understood that they needed a more human-centric approach. And now these meta skills have become super important. How to do things, instead of teaching somebody you should be doing that, learn how to learn. Now my question to you is there an effective approach for personal growth? Like, is there, like, if I have to decide as an individual on my own, what could be important for me? What could be helpful and help me grow in general, including my well-being? Because we tend to forget our well-being only until we get into the deep, into the depth of the pit. Is there a grounded and effective approach to think about what is important for our personal growth, Lincoln?
I guess the simple answer is just to follow the difficulty, or follow the pain, or follow what's bothering you. I would, so I'm a kind of overachiever, which means I go toward what's difficult because I'm curious and it might bother me. And I also go to uh, what I lust after, or feel drawn to, or have an appetite for. So on the one hand, so the mixture of those two,
Pain and
you're trying.
curiosity.
Yeah, well, that's the latter, what I lust and I'm curious and have appetite for, the things that I like to work on. But also they're the things that bother me. So if you're the kind of person that doesn't have anything that bothers you, and you're not particularly lusting after anything, then you might live a fairly calm and happy life.
Yeah. Live in the moment, right?
Yeah, and go nowhere, never grow, and have nothing to say. And that might be called bliss, you
Mm.
know? And is that bad?
No,
Mm,
I wish I
well,
had that possibility, that option.
well, well, the question is then, are is it meaningful? Well, you might say, I'm fine, I'm happy.
Hmm?
And then you could extend that and say, well, are you being useful to the people around you? Uh, are you being helpful in society? Are you advancing anything? And your answer might be, I don't care. I'm fine.
Hmm?
So that's an answer for some people.
Hmm?
They they get by or they're approved. They have enough problems supporting their family and emotionally supporting their children or their parents or their partners. And their goal is to keep things calm. And that's not a bad thing because from calmness, you can reach out toward your curiosity, or from calmness, you can address your problems. So there's a need for grounding and support. But the person who's only grounded and who lives only in the world of support doesn't change. And there is a use for that. But personally, I think we have an obligation to deal with problems, especially the ones we create, but also the ones other people create or the ones around us. And, the question would then be, how do I make a positive contribution to my business, my environment, my social circle? And it's sort of the same. You deal with the things that are problematic by trying to understand them, getting involved, and inevitably being confused, conflicted, and uncertain. And also by recognizing what you think is of positive value and trying to support it,
Hmm?
which isn't always so easy because, you can say, I love you. What does that mean? Um, or you have to see what other people want. So here's typical as a parent. How do you support your children? You don't just say, I love you, have a nice time, brush your teeth, good night. You have to understand their problems and you have to engage, and it can't be trivialized, and you can't be a know-it-all. Um, and you also can't be so involved in other people's problems that you lose, your bearing. So it's a combination. I think that's really the ultimate answer. You have to combine the chaos and confusion of novelty with some basis of stability and faith in something. And that's how you work forward. And everyone's going to have a slightly different mix, a slightly different line, a different goal. But if you're not trying, which also means not somewhat struggling, so I don't subscribe to the bliss version of human responsibility. That you know, peace and happiness are not the goal.
Hmm.
It's a means, but it's not a goal. If you're too peaceful and happy, you're useless, even to yourself. So there's a certain amount of not peace and not happiness that motivates awareness and change, engagement and evolution. And that's, I guess I have to leave it there. That combination of those two. And if you can sit there and smile at me at the same time that you remember being abandoned in Lima at the age of 10 or whatever, I have no idea, um, then you're probably combining the two in a way that you're making some use with. I mean, you're talking to me, so that's good. And I will tell you, Ivan, you're full of shit. Ivan, you're avoiding yourself, or Ivan, you're the only person who has these problems. And maybe that it's not going to strike you. I can see because you're taking it with humor. But if we were doing counseling and you were telling me what really bothered you, and then I told you you were full of shit, then you might take offense and say, no,
Certainly.
yeah. So, and I have dealt with people and I have said that and they have taken offense and they have fired me. And then I'm left to think, well, maybe did I go too far? I mean, I don't know. But I have to say, well, I was given the opportunity and I took it, and this was the reaction. And I don't like getting fired because then I can't like take it to the next level. That's usually the point where we finally made a breakthrough. Oh, now we're talking. Um, but some people have to stop there. But that's okay. I guess plateau, work on it until something next happens.
So you have mentioned in order to identify what we should be learning for our own self-development, pain, curiosity, what bothers us, we can even call it satisfaction about whatever level of life that we have. But my next question is, so how should we learn? Should we do stupid road that I took a couple of years ago, read whatever falls in my hands about self-development because I want to be the youngest vice president of bullshit company, or should I do something different? Today, many people learn through videos, even TikToks, by the way, or take courses online, or get a counseling person, a
Mhm.
coach. What do you think it should be the most effective way to, when it's about self-development, to go do stuff?
Um, simple answer, do many different things. Don't do things that are boring and repetitive, but also recognize that there is, in some things, detail worth exploring. Don't waste your time on details that aren't forthcoming. So, being a perfectionist generally isn't useful, I don't think. Some people are very perfectionist and very accurate. And I'm kind of like a B student. If you're getting an A, then you're not challenging yourself. If you're getting a D, then you're not learning enough. So you want to be a B student, which means if things are too easy, do more. And inevitably, since things are not generally calm and even and regular, you'll stray into areas where you're overwhelmed, and then you'll have good days where everything seems to be perfect and you don't know what to do because you're relaxed. And you have to combine this. It's uh, it's sort of like a multinational business, your personality. It's got all different areas and they all need to be attended to. And they all got different managers and they've all got different productions and assemblies and products. And you're trying to keep it moving forward. I spent many years playing classical guitar, and the most interesting thing turned out to be not the performance or not the music. It was just listening to the notes and finding detail and subtlety and structure in sound. Because if you didn't have structure and sound, you were just going to be like a player piano. It was just going to be automatic. You weren't going to be able to put anything special into sound if you didn't understand sound at a deep level. So there, repetition, well, I wasn't actually repeating myself. I was learning detail in the process of playing scales. Um, I have no desire to do it now, although sometimes I do. But I, you know, oh, here's a good one. Looking at faces in the clouds or voices in your head. So there's something that seems pointless, but it's not because it's like Rorschach tests. If you start seeing things where they don't exist, you can realize that this is your mind bubbling up in ways that you might not have been sensitive to. So, what faces do you see in the clouds? Are they mean faces? Are they happy faces? What voices do you hear in your head? And can you control them? Or do they say mean things to you? Uh, this is, I think, why we dream, so that we can see more of those faces and hear more of those voices, because they're important. They are locked in us somewhere. And until you hear them, explore them, and eventually try to make peace with them, you're not expanding. So, you get to the question you ask is, how do you know what to do? You engage difficult, perhaps threatening things in a way that you feel you have some breadth, some guidance. It could be your own guidance. You don't need to get a guide. Your own guide is essentially the best one.
Mm.
But if you don't have any sense of value, purpose, and meaning, there's not too much foothold you can have as a guide. So you need purpose and meaning. And I think you get those through being as honest and committed and attentive as possible. Honest and committed and attentive, responsible, and willing to contest and disagree and shake things up as much as you're going to do the same thing with your son as you are going to with your partner or your boss or your social circle or your political adversaries. They'll all be different dialogues. But in every case, you're trying to keep a foothold on what you believe in and push the other person to their level of questioning that's deeper than just reciting something stupid like the law of attraction. And I've been with people who said, "Oh, but you have soul," and I just keep my mouth shut. Like, okay,
I should
that's what
not
you
say
want to
anything.
talk about. No, I'm not gonna say anything. So, so it changes with the situation. And if you're gonna ask yourself what you should do, it's going to be a different question. I would do stupid things mountaineering when I was young. I'm not going to do them now. I wouldn't get the same result. I'm too responsible for other people. But, I'm confused. I would like to make more money, but I'm not going to compromise and produce garbage to accomplish that. So, I labor with my values and try to be honest to myself. And I produce a lot of stuff. And I don't go with the flow to my, financial detriment. But you know, I I think of my mortality and what I'm going to make with myself. And it's helpful to be around people who are at the end of their life or who have died and so forth, and to see that there is an arc and there is an end, and you're going to come to it too one of these days. And how do you feel about that? And are you aware of it? The mountaineering and death is good to remember. It helped me remember. So when I say I'm traumatized by things I did when I was young, they do also help me remember. Like uh, I like flying airplanes. There's something interesting about it, but I don't like crashing them, and I've done that a couple of times too. So how do you mix the two? Well, the answer to that is you become proficient. Then you can enjoy the good stuff and avoid the bad stuff. So being proficient, that's pretty easy when it comes to something technical. It just means doing it more and controlling the environment more carefully. Um, and you don't drive your car when the wheels are loose. You uh, don't get involved with people. You don't buy drugs on the street. There are things you do that are careful, but you do argue with people you disagree with, who you think are valuable, and you do engage in your own self questioning in areas where you feel uncertain. And it's important to remain somewhat uncertain. That's the ultimate answer. To have some strength and use it to confront the important questions in your life, which may only be important to you, but that's okay.
I think that this is one of the things that I extract the most out of this discussion. Uh, so in order to start a journey for self-development, you need people needs to dig a little bit, go into the introspection to understand your own values. Uh, and also something that really resonated with me when you mentioned I don't go with the flow, uh, because that's the currency. Because this I don't go with the flow. has a price. The price, the positive side, is freedom because we are not attached to our attaching our decisions to financial impact. Uh, we have made a choice, but we are in line with our values, and we sometimes when we are a little bit intellectual, we feel like satisfied. Oh, I say no to this fucking fucker. Anyways, but it has a price. Sometimes the price can be pain. It's like pain because people think that we are weird. Uh, People will put us aside, and we will not have the same level of expectation as society values as success in life. Uh, but it is a beautiful way of saying self-development, if you go in depth and what matters for you, will lead you to introspection. And introspection, when you go inside of you, then you have to take choices uh, in life. And sometimes these choices might be painful. I went a little bit too crazy on that, Lincoln. I'm so sorry for for that last comment.
Hmm, I don't see what you're sorry about. Could be painful. What's wrong with saying that? Did
No,
I miss something?
it's not. But for society, is somebody called me morbid. For
Oh,
society, is morbid. You mentioned also about the fact of continuously, oh, no, you didn't say continuously, but thinking about that we are perishable, that there is death, and that's a drive to find purpose, meaning of what we have. The exchange with people is, Ivan, you are morbid.
ah, okay. Well,
Anyways,
okay.
that's a comment. Lincoln, it was really nice, inspiring, and I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart because I think that this is the kind of discussion that I could definitely continue having in front of a nice beer in the bar, because it is inspiring, and I really enjoyed talking to you. Tell me, I know that you have written. I think you have written more than 10 books. Is that correct?
I'm 9 or something, whatever.
Okay, nine books. So how can people find you, connect with you? I know that you have a website. I have it in front of me somewhere. How else people can find you, Lincoln?
Well, there are different ways to learn. The website is mindstrengthbalance.com,
Yep.
and the products are the books, which are, there's a series on sleep and sleep related things like dreams. There's a sleep series on education and learning, which is another 3 books. And there's some sort of one-off books on hypnosis and health,
Hmm.
which is another ongoing series. And then there's a blog. So sign up for the blog, you get a free post every month, and if you pay for it, you get it weekly. And there's you can talk to me. I give a free Zoom call of short duration to anybody. It's not counseling because that's got an obligation that's special, but it's, introductory, and it's free. And all of these things are on the website, as well as quite a bit of other stuff. Um, so that would be the place to look. And of course, there's an email. You can always email me questions. And I
Hmm.
do act as a counselor. So, and I encourage people to consider that. Of course, you get more out of it when you know what you're doing or know why you're doing it. Um, so usually the 2 reasons are I'm upset or I'm trying to grow and achieve, the 2 reasons, right? I need help, or, you know, I'm looking for advice. So either of those are fine. I don't believe in focusing on one thing like mental illness or business coaching or something, relationship counseling. It's all mixed together and it changes. So, like we said, you follow the threads that are the most potent, and they could be painful, or they could be old, or they could be hopeful. Everybody's addicted to something. if it's either in your mind or in your body. And anything that you can push against is something that you can elevate yourself through. Anything.
Hmm.
Belief, habit, situation, past. So it's a question of how much resources do you have? Time, money, emotion. That's a big answer to a small question.
Hmm. Thank you, Lincoln, for this beautiful discussion. It was wonderful to spend time with you.
Thanks, Ivan. I appreciate it.